Alright, guys. I have not paid very much attention at all to Kamala Harris. Okay, I just haven't. And really, most of the things I've seen or heard have been, mostly negative, right? Not very many people have a lot of great things to say about Kamala Harris. So, if there is anything positive, I'm definitely going to talk about that. Okay, I am not going to, allow other people to control what I think is good or what I think is bad. Now, before we get into this, they had a guy on there just before this, and what he said was banning books is not freedom. And that, as a blanket statement, right? Not allowing any nuance at all, is just wrong. No matter how you look at it, there are certain books that should be banned, okay? But it depends on which ones you're talking about. There are a lot of different types of books that just should not be accessible to children. Okay, I think that should go without saying. Even when it comes to books, for the general public, right? For adults and everything like that. There's still books that we should not have access to. Okay, there just are. Imagine someone within the government, right, goes and writes a book and reveals a lot of secret information, right, that no one else in the world should have. Okay. Now, if the general public gets a hold of that, then, like, the cat is out of the bag at that point, right? Like, at that point, any of us could go online and share that information, and then the whole world will have access to it. So, yes, even for adults, there are certain books which we just should not have access to. But that list is obviously going to be a lot smaller, right? Because generally speaking, most of the things an adult wants to have access to, they should, right? Of course, within reason. But when it comes to children, the list of things that should be off limits, that list is huge and it should be. But to take it at face value, going by what he said, banning books is not freedom. That's a blanket statement, right? That encompasses like everything involving banning books. So does that mean he thinks children should have access to every single book on the planet? There's no way he thinks that. You guys put in the comments and let me know if you think that's what he meant, or if he meant like for adults, right? Like, we shouldn't be, saying to adults, well, you shouldn't have access to this book, right? So, a few minutes ago, I did some research because I wanted to see what kind of books, both sides are wanting to ban. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick out one book from each side, and we're going to see which side we agree with the most. Okay. So look at this. So here's what I asked. What children's books do the left and right want to ban? The debate over which children's books should be banned often reflects broader ideological divides. Here's a general overview of the types of books that have been targeted by various groups on the left and right. Now, here's what I want to illustrate to you guys. This is a really important way to do research, okay? Because if I just typed in what books do the Democrats want to ban, and that's the only research I did, that eliminates the side of the Republicans wanting to ban books as well. Okay, because they actually do. want to ban books. Okay? And then, like, what I find sometimes is, like, and it happens with both sides, right? They'll accuse the other side of, well, you want to do this, you want to do that. But then it turns out that they also want to do all those things just in like different areas, right? Oh, the Democrats want to ban books, they want to ban this, they want to ban that. And it turns out, well, guess what? They also want to ban books. You know, what really matters is which books do they want to ban? That's the most crucial point right there. And keep in mind, this is only referring to children's books, okay? Books targeted by the right. Books with LGBTQ themes. Books featuring critical race theory or discussion of racism. So I wonder which part is the most important part that they're attacking. The critical race theory part or just discussion of racism in general, right? Because look, a lot of history is uncomfortable. A lot of history is ugly, right? But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to it because it's part of history. Now, that doesn't mean everything to do with history they should see. Obviously not, right? There are, certain limits that, you just shouldn't go into. So I think this one right here stamped racism, anti-racism, and you. That might be one we should take a look at. Yeah, so I think out of these, the most interesting is this one right here. Racism, anti-racism, and you. Now, I have a feeling the anti-racism, that might be the part that got it put on this list. Okay. If the overall message with that is that it's not enough, to not be racist, you have to be anti-racist. If that's the message of it, then I could start to see, like, where they're coming from with this. Then there's also the whole, like, white privilege thing and all of that stuff. And if they're going to, if this book right here is going to be along the lines of what the right would consider critical race theory, then I could understand why it's on this list. Okay, but keep in mind, there's two sides to every story. So I don't know if schools are actually teaching critical race theory or not. And if they are, I don't know what version of it they're teaching. Okay. Now, I've done quite a bit of research into this. There's two different versions of it. You ask someone from the left, they will say it is an examination of anything to do with racist, rhetoric, racist laws, loopholes that allows racism, anything like that. That's what it is. You ask someone from the right, they're going to say that, pretty much white people are always born with privilege. They are always, ahead in life. They're always like, can just skate through life without any worries or any troubles. Okay. And if that's what schools are teaching, then I'm going to stand with the Republicans on that. That's a bunch of bull. Okay. And yeah, I mean, I've heard horror stories about like a teacher wanted a kid to stand up and say and declare that he's racist because he's a white kid. Like, I just don't buy into that. That's a bunch of crap. And I think most of you guys would argue against that as well. Like, that is not okay. So here are the books targeted by the left. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Due to racial slurs and stereotypes. So, as I said, a lot of history is uncomfortable. A lot of history is, ugly. Okay. I don't know too much about it. Like, I know, like, the basic premise of it, I think. Think about something like Blazing Saddles. Okay. Now, one thing I want to make very clear, a lot of black people love that movie. You want to know why they love that movie? Because it is, you know, more of a accurate representation of what it was like back then, I think. When they use the N word in that movie, they consider it funny, and which I would have been surprised by that until I actually started watching a lot of different people do reactions to that movie. If you don't believe me, go watch it. Go watch a lot of different content creators react to, you know, racist Family Guy videos, right? And on that topic, here's one thing I want to say. As far as Family Guy goes, they're like risky black jokes and this and that. And what I think a lot of it is, in my opinion, they're not making fun of black people. They're making fun of racism as a whole. That's what they're making fun of, right? Now, I could be wrong. Maybe there are some people that takes it a different way or whatever else, and that's okay. I think it's okay to have different opinions. Little House on the Prairie, due to depictions of racism and Native Americans. If it's an accurate representation, and it's not like too over the top, right, with the slurs and all that kind of stuff, and, then I don't really see the big problem with it. Books that perpetuate harmful stereotypes or misinformation. Yeah, see, this one I don't think should be in here. The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. Criticism over certain illustrations in some of Dr. Seuss's books. Now, there was a thing where a lot of people thought they were trying to cancel Dr. Seuss because of a few books that got pulled out of production. Now, that actually was a huge misunderstanding because the publishers of those books, right, had ended up deciding that they were just too, over the top and everything else, and they wanted them pulled, right? It wasn't the Democrats that wanted them pulled or anything like that, and they could have, but that's not why a few of those books got pulled. It wasn't a whole lot of them. Dr. Seuss isn't canceled. Yeah, I really don't know which book the left wants canceled that we should really take a look at. I don't know. Yeah, so with this, the appropriateness, I think that is going to have, the most moral high ground, right? I think appropriateness and then like historically accurate. Like that's the other thing. Okay, something could be, completely accurate, but totally inappropriate. So the appropriateness is what's going to, take that out of the equation, take that off the table, right? The appropriateness needs to come first. Then, if it's historically accurate and it's appropriate, that's not like, like I said, too over the top, then I think it should be at least considered. And there should be common sense discussions, right, over what they get access to and what they don't. Yeah, as far as the harmful stereotypes or misinformation, I wonder what the misinformation would be. Also, notice too, the categories are much smaller with what the left wants banned. Now, isn't that like the total opposite of what you would normally hear from Republicans? The left wants this banned, they want that banned, they want all your freedom away, they want all this other, control and everything else. They only list two different categories here. Yeah, that's it. Two categories. So the categories are stereotypes, offensive language, harmful stereotypes, or misinformation. Those are the categories. So I show enough with, the books that the left wants to ban. And I want you guys to let me know which of these books are like the most offensive and the ones that we should do another video and take a look at. This one right here, I'm going to go ahead and look up some information about it. So I will be back in a few minutes. All right, guys. So I have done a little bit of research into this book. Okay. And what I want to focus in on is he categorizes people in three different ways: racist, assimilationist, and anti racist. The assimilationist is the part I'm most confused about because I've never heard of that before. Okay? Reynolds is also highly critical of assimilationist thinkers like Garrison and influential 19th century abolitionists, and Du Bois, a prominent 20th century black intellectual. Although Garrison and Du Bois devoted their lives to combating racism and racial injustice, Reynolds criticizes their implicit acceptance of black inferiority and their goal of helping black people assimilate into white society. If they are, in fact, supporting the idea of black inferiority, then I would totally support anyone criticizing them. Okay, regardless of, whether they are actually combating racism or not. If they have this mentality of black inferiority, then they're wrong on that point. They're right because they're wanting to combat racism, but if they hold that point of view, then they have a lot of racism within themselves. So they're kind of fighting against themselves at that point. So I'm sure some of you guys might have a lot more information about all that. So feel free to put it in the comments and let me know what you guys think.
Now, let's talk about what we're dealing with on the other side. So on that last topic, if Donald Trump gets the chance, he will end the Affordable Care Act and take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. Well, Governor Walz and I will not let that happen.
Now, I remember when I was working, they specifically told me that, okay, that whenever I first got, insurance coverage through my employer, they said any pre-existing conditions would not be covered. Now, whether or not, Affordable Care Act actually fixed any of that or not, I don't know. If it did, I'm going to say that's a great thing, okay?
Because we believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. As governor, Tim has continued to fight for working families. He secured paid leave for workers in Minnesota. And he refused, as governor, to allow any student in their public schools to go hungry so he made school breakfast and lunch free for every child. And Tim Walz and I, we agree about many things, including when our middle class is strong, America is strong.
These two statements seem to be contradictory, right? I could understand free breakfast and lunch for, needy families, right? Who are actually living in poverty. I can understand that. But to go so far as to say every single student gets free breakfast and lunch, it seems to me that that is a lot of extra costs that would go on the backs of the working class, right? Because they're going to have to pay for that. Someone's going to have to pay for it.
In this moment, we are witnessing a full-on attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. Take reproductive freedom. Now think about this. Donald Trump said he wants to punish women. And as a result of his actions, today in America, 1 out of 3 women live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. 1 out of 3. Some of these bans go back to the 1800s, even before women had a right to vote. Think about that. Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump and others who want to turn back the clock on our fundamental freedoms. We're not going back.
Yeah, now this right here is what makes it really hard for me to take these guys serious. Okay, I don't get this argument.
So Tim is a hunter and a gun owner who believes, as the majority of gun owners do, that we need reasonable gun safety laws in America.
Okay, define reasonable, please. It's like, you can't just say that without, giving us some credible information.
As governor, he expanded background checks and increased penalties for illegal firearm sales.
So what does expanded background checks mean exactly? So this is where a lot more nuance would actually be helpful. Okay, so if she's saying more things in a person's past could disqualify them from owning firearms, then I'm going to say that's wrong. Okay. The other part too is that just completely ignores the Second Amendment. I get the argument behind it, right? Because after a certain point, once you show that, every time you possess a firearm, you use it to rob a bank, or you use it to, go and harass people with it, try to shoot people or whatever else, right? So how many offenses are we going to look over until we finally say, you know what, enough is enough? You have shown you are not capable of, handling a firearm appropriately. At what point do we draw the line? Now, someone who is strictly, Second Amendment, they would say, we never draw that line, I guess. And then someone from the left would say, well, we draw that line pretty early. So like any felony, any violent crime, any crime at all, like I guess it depends on how far left you want to go. So that's really what this is about, right? Like where should the line be drawn, if it's drawn at all? You know, I'm more on the side of people can change and people should have a way to earn their rights back if they're ever lost at all. Okay. It just the same thing with, becoming a felon where you don't get to vote anymore. I don't agree with that either. In my opinion, you're still a United States citizen and you should still have the right to vote. And I'll go ahead and explain this so hopefully everyone can grasp what I'm talking about. Okay, so every single group of people in the United States should be represented whenever it's time to vote. That means the people who was convicted of, felonies or, anything else like that in that area. Okay. You have taxpayers, those should be represented. You have, single mothers, those should be represented. Every single group of people, right? And it doesn't matter which way they vote. It is America. We're supposed to celebrate our freedom. They can vote however they want. And that goes along the lines of saying that, people of a certain race, culture, or heritage, well, they shouldn't vote this way. They're supposed to vote that way. No, like, get out of here with that. A person's personality and perspective is mostly based on anecdotal evidence, right? The things they've experienced, or the things someone they trust and know for a long time, the things they've experienced, and the things they've learned from them. So it's going to be different with every single person. We shouldn't be gatekeeping, anyone's beliefs or opinions, right? Everyone should have the freedom to think however they want. For people that believe in conspiracy theories, they should also be represented when it comes to voting. So we shouldn't ever get to a point where we say, this group of people, you're not allowed to vote, right? And I'm going to go ahead and explain why I say that, because I've heard a lot of different people say, oh, there should be an IQ test before you can vote. It should be based on who pays taxes. Those are the only ones that should be able to vote. Then there's another idea that, well, only men should be able to vote because they contribute more to society. And it's all just a bunch of crap. Here's the way I look at it. Every single group of people has a specific interest overall in the country, right? If you are living in poverty, let's say, your biggest interest would be programs that could help you get out of that poverty and stand on your own 2 feet. So any politician or anyone else that comes along and are saying things that you would agree with, you think that policy could help me, I'm going to vote for them. You are now representing everyone in that group who think the same thing. Okay? Any taxpayer, right, who doesn't want to pay an exorbitant amount of taxes to help every single other group of people, you're voting and you're representing everyone who has that same belief, right? As far as the felons go, they would probably want to see policies that would create programs to help them earn their way back to society, right? Maybe get out of prison early. Maybe get special programs to help them get their records expunged. Help them learn new skills and new trades, right? And make it easier for them to learn those skills so that they could then stand on their own 2 feet. And those I think are very important factors. Now, if America ever gets to the point to where we are actually excluding people based on taxes, based on, gender, based on race, based on anything. And they're all those categories are the same problem, right? Because that, the phrase slippery slope, that's the slipperiest slope. Okay. The second we get into, making it easier to say this group of people can't vote anymore, then that group of people has no more influence at all when it comes to the rights that they're preserving, when it comes to programs that would help them, get out of ruts, get out of, this problem or that problem, and help them out. And ultimately, what I'm going to say about this, as far as like helping people, I think it should go far beyond what we're doing right now. You know, the phrase, it takes money to make money. I think that is what should change. Okay. I think it should be easier for people to start businesses. It should be easier for people to find resources that can help them start a business. To put this in the simplest way, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Okay. Now, to take that into terms of what we're talking about here, it goes far beyond just teaching him how to fish. He needs fish now, if that makes any sense. Right? Now, that doesn't work both ways. If you go to just the fish and eating, right? He can learn how to fish in a day and then he has fish, right? But in terms of, starting a business or finding a really good career that's going to, like, send someone off to a place of independence, that's going to take some time. And while all that is happening, that person is going to need resources in order to sustain their livelihood, right? And for that matter, we have a lot of people who thinks all taxes are theft. They don't want to pay taxes at all on anything. And here's what I have to say to those people. How do you think the government is going to continue to function without any taxes? Without any money at all going back to the government? The government, in my, personal opinion, the way I see things, I could be wrong, but I think without taxes, the government would go bankrupt. And that means instead of having government programs, right, and everything else, the American people would have to pay for everything, right? That means if your house is on fire and you call the fire department, guess what? You're going to have to run for your credit card and pay the bill for them to come out and put your fire out. And by the time they get there, guess what? Your house is probably gone. Okay. That means calling the police, right? Someone's broken in my house. Well, guess what? If you can't pay the bill for us to come out and assist you, no help is coming. You're going to have to deal with it on your own. That's not a place I want to live. And anyone who's opposed to all taxes, I ask you if that would be a good solution. Okay. Now, we all should know the roads that we drive on to go back and forth to work and everything else, that costs money to maintain those roads. So if there's zero taxes, where's that money going to come from? I think there would be a lot of toll roads, right? That would be going back and forth to work, especially if you work in another town. You may end up having to stop at 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 different tolls and have to pay to get access to those roads. Is that a good solution? Would you really be okay with adding Especially you got to consider the long lines and everything else, adding, several hours to your commute to get back and forth to work instead of being able to get on the highway and just take off and go. I don't think so. I don't think that'd be a good solution. I do understand the point of overtaxation is theft. I definitely get that, and I support that notion. I think in a lot of cases, people are taxed way too much. Property tax is one that I don't understand at all, and that is the one that funds schools apparently. For because I've been doing a little bit of digging and some research and learning a little bit here and there, and that's what I'm pretty sure I've come to learn is that all property tax goes towards funding schools. And so that is why in poverty ridden areas, that's why the schools are severely lacking. It's because the homes and the properties aren't worth as much money, so there's less money, getting paid by the way of property tax that's going to the schools. So they're getting less money, so then therefore the schools don't have as much funds as another school would, right? In other areas.
And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban.
So what I want you to do, go ahead and define assault weapons. Okay, go ahead and do that for me. Universal background checks. We already get background checks when we go to apply to get a weapon anyways. And red flag laws. I think this is going towards what I was talking about, a little bit ago, right? Which is like where they're going to start digging up a lot of different things from your past in order to say, no, you don't qualify to get a weapon now. And in that case, it's like, do we even have the Second Amendment then? If you can really just strip anyone's rights away because, of irrelevant factors.
So, Pennsylvania, ultimately in this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? A country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of...
What about the freedom for unborn children? What about their freedom? What about the freedom of all of the United States citizens who are supposed to have the right to bear arms, but are told they can't? What about their freedom? So really what you're saying is only freedom for, the people on the left. Just their freedom.
And so my promise to you is this. Our campaign will reach out to everyone, from red states to blue states, from the heartland to the coast, in rural, urban, suburban, and tribal communities. We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans.
Well, there's a lot of Americans who want to keep their rights to own firearms. So those Americans aren't included in the ones she's going to fight for. Okay. I think the ultimate question comes down to what side is protecting the most freedom. So I try to do everything in a balanced way. Okay. So I think with the next video I'm going to do that's, covering this topic right here, I think it's going to be covering a Trump rally or a Trump speech or something like that. Now, if you guys have something in mind of a good Trump rally, a good Trump speech, whatever else, put in the comments. Okay. So, all right. That's it for now, y'all.